and welcome to Life Support Live, the weekly Star Trek show that helps you to boldly go in your own life to better yourself and the rest of humanity.
As a famous starship captain once said, to which another famous starship captain also said, well, actually, like 100 years earlier, wherever our mission takes us, we will try to have a little fun along the way.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Ali Mattu.
I'm glad you thought about it. And I'm Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. One of us is a real doctor.
And one of us is also frozen the moment we started the show. That's great. I love the internet. Larry, I'm gonna boot you out and bring you back in because for some reason, the moment we started, things froze. Oh, what a great start.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that, folks. Let's see if we can fix that for you all. Let me bring in my co-host and friend back into the show. Hopefully we can fix this. For any of you wondering what shirt I'm wearing this week, this is another favorite. I think it might have been made by a similar artist. It has the Starfleet Arrowhead logo with starships in it, in case you're wondering. Yes,
is currently unavailable. Please leave a message after the...
It says, it's telling me that Larry's unavailable. Oh, here we go. All right. Larry,
and?
I think you're...
wow.
Well, I have your audio. I don't necessarily have your video. That's fun. Remember, Larry? We did almost a whole episode like this one time.
Yeah. Let's not do that. Not with the blue Superman S. Okay.
Is your video on?
I'm seeing me on my local camera. Yes. Oh no. How about that?
And welcome, folks, to this is the kind of production quality you have come to expect and love from Life Support Live. Welcome.
We get to blame Skype a little bit because they pulled a fast one on us, but yes.
That's right. Larry, Dr. Trek, if this is people's first time here at Life Support Live, what kind of amazing stuff can they expect from us?
They can expect all kinds of wonderful tips on live streaming, how to do it, how to... Oh, wait, that's my other show. No. Hi, everybody.
What not
Welcome
to do?
Live stream. Live stream live, yeah. Live Support Live, that's the other LSL show. No, guys, hey, everybody. I'm so glad to see all of our regular lifers here this morning. Maybe you're new with us this week. So this is our 42nd weekly edition, guys and gals. Hey, we boldly go through uncertain times. We have a lot of fun with Star Trek, looking at it through a mental health lens, or vice versa. And we actually have a structure to the show. You wouldn't believe it, but no. We have a theme every week. I'm pointing up here because I can't see the frame. Is the frame on?
Yeah, technology and mental health is the theme this week, and
that's good because that's the one I prepared for. Yay!
Yes, yeah. Larry, I'm hearing now an echo of myself through you because, of course, I am. Actually, well, now it sounds better. Okay, I guess I'm not. Maybe I am stuck in some kind of alternate dimension like Riker and things are just...
We're having a streaming issue, definitely, because I'm not getting a clear picture with you. But if you're getting me okay, I guess that's what's important.
I'm getting you okay now. Yeah.
Okay.
Christoph says no echo for us. Wonderful. Well,
yay,
folks,
because the customer is always right.
Today's topic, Larry, is technology and mental health, and sometimes it produces a lot of stress, and sometimes it produces a lot of connection. So, folks, let us know, what's your favorite episode from Star Trek that shows some kind of theme related to technology and mental health? Let us know in the comments below. Larry, my guess is we're going to get a lot...
Do you mean like the neural neutralizer going woo, woo, woo on your head,
Sure.
or do you mean more broad-based?
I'm talking, let's go, neuro neutralizers. I'm also talking like pads and, maybe I'm inundated with email have you seen some of these Starfleet captains and how many pads they have on their desks? There must be a strong impact on their mental health. There's so many ways that we can take this. My prediction is there's going to be a lot of holodeck comments from our lovely community over here. But we've got a few tricks up our sleeves for episodes we want to dive into today. So, folks, we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comments what are your favorite episodes. We're going to be talking about a lot of different topics today. This is such a broad topic. And Larry,
Yes.
where would
it
you?
is. Yeah.
Where?
I hope it's not too broad, but yes, after I started thinking about it, yeah.
Yeah, we had a fun time preparing for this one because I brought up some ideas and Larry's like, really? Okay. I guess, yeah, that is technology and mental health. So it's going to be, we're going to have a fun time with this.
Well, because
Larry,
actually, what I thought we meant at the beginning is what you said, well, we'll do that as another topic later. And I'm like, oh, okay. That narrower thread, which we could still do, we'll do that later. So, yay.
Let's go big. Keep that funnel big, and then we'll come down here. Larry, where would you like to start our journey this week?
Let's start technology and mental health on what it is like when you wake up and there's a new edition of your app waiting for you as you're about to go live on. That's a little stressor right there. Yeah.
Which is what happened to us,
here's
folks.
the thing.
Why we're having a little choppy time.
This is really pretty broad, and things cleared up on my end. Maybe they'll clear up for you. This is really broad because here's the thing. A lot of our topics break down this way. There's like the individual, it's like the old man versus nature, man versus man versus. There's like the individual effect, but then there's also the social effect. Like, so I can think of technology and broad technology, like almost as a social movement technology, or like specific pieces of technology, and then affecting a broad society, or like the individual. I mean, like you can go. There's 4 permutations right there. So I like to keep it individualistic, but I think like the way we talk about social media and live streaming, it's a social thing affecting a lot of people broadly. And also the fact that sometimes when it's a new technology, the effects, good and bad, creep up on a population before
a lot of
really
unintended
understood.
consequences. Right.
Yes.
Right. It makes me think of, I'm getting ahead of myself, but why not? Because usually I'm behind. It makes me, if anyone's seen the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, it's a great interview with a variety of people who've made some of the technology that dominates our lives now. But they have an interview with the person who invented the like button, who says, we invented it thinking we were going to spread positivity throughout the planet, that people are just going to be liking things and it's going to be spreading just good cheer. We had no idea the consequences on mental health of how people would be posting pictures for the likes, and if they don't get enough likes, they would delete that photo of themselves, or not getting enough likes would make them influence the way they thought of how ugly they are, or of political polarization. So a lot of unintended consequences. I mean,
I know engineers, they love to change things.
I'm a doctor, Larry, not an engineer, but I can't talk about the mental health implications here. I mean, that sounds like a lot of the original series. What we're talking about here is unintended consequences of big technology. That feels like every original series episode that features technology.
Yes. Well, like you said, it's almost every... when you're under pressure to use the backlot because it's cheap, and the costumes, that underscores a lot of the, one of the tropes of the original series is going to the Roman planet, the Nazi planet, the gangster planet.
Right, the gangster planet.
And it was so some of the things I got around to, I was trying to think of some of the latter series, and about this aspect, and they're there. But anyway, when you go to the original series, I started off anyway, and I know we go down the individualistic rabbit hole, but I was trying to think about big effects on big numbers of people, And one of the things that came to mind is the image I sent you was good old A Taste of Armageddon. Because if we're talking about social media, but in that culture, they were so afraid of war that they let one consequence affect another, which is they would still gladly go die if it meant they were keeping this phony peace going, using computer algorithms to figure out who should go die so they can, look like they're the two Vendikar and Minior 3 attacking each other. And they didn't want to have it be big and bomby and messy, so they just people just volunteered to go to, I forget the name of the chamber, but and that was really sick and twisted. And good old Kirk comes in to say, well, have a bloody war and maybe you'll stop it. Which I know it's interesting reading Newer Eyes to Star Trek talking about, my God, what was the point of the Prime Directive? They broke it. Well, the Prime Directive wasn't invented until late first season, but yes, exactly. But there you go. But that's a case where that culture had Kirk has that speech about but the culture lives on. That's in the bloopers. But it's that thing. It's like, what is the effect culture wide on you people? And we're going to work on these individuals and this big, easily targeted computer box.
Yeah. And this episode was one of the first ones we identified in our prep for this, because I wanted to really talk about the impact that algorithms have on our daily life. And like in A Taste of Armageddon, the algorithms are they're kind of running in the background, having this profound effect on society, and that's happening to us. But for us, it might be a bit more invisible. You don't see this giant box, this giant computer box. So one example I'll give is every time you open...
If you watch The Social Network, you might see a representation of it. But yeah.
Yeah, The Social Dilemma. The Social Dilemma does it's very much like a TOS episode, the way they visualize it. But when you open up your any social media platform, most of them, they algorithmically display posts. In the olden days meaning like 10 years ago, they displayed posts based on who you're connected to and the most recent posts. And as you scroll down, you get to the older posts. Well, now what happens is, Larry, if I post let's say a status update or a link or a photo, Facebook, Twitter, all of the different social media platforms, TikTok, they share it with a small group of people. They look to see, are these people engaging with it? And based upon that, they share it with a wider group of people. And if it's not highly performing, that post is not shared. And Facebook has experimented with this in sometimes ethically dubious ways, where they've looked to see, can they actually manipulate the way people feel based upon the status updates that they post. And they actually were very much able to influence how sad, how happy you felt based upon displaying other sad or happy updates. So these algorithms that actually have a pretty profound effect on how you feel, on political beliefs. We can talk about YouTube, and if you just, sometimes depending on the video that you watch, the YouTube algorithm can feed you more and more of that content, and this has been pretty well documented. It can become more and more extreme in its views, whether those are extreme views about Star Trek, extreme views about politics,
It's really a digital like rumination. Isn't that a word you use in mental health?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like going down the rabbit hole digitally.
Churning on thoughts over and over again without any outside input. Right. It's can be quite dangerous, and these algorithms are having a profound impact on. I have someone in my family, Larry, who over the course of the last 5 years, their political views have become quite extreme, and it's largely because of YouTube, and it's the type of content that they fell into. And the people who are most vulnerable for this are the people who are a bit more alone and isolated, and they can sometimes get connected to the very, very dangerous communities online. So these algorithms, in a small way based on what you see on Facebook, but in a big way too. In terms of politics, the Brazilian political changes that happened over the past few years, a lot of researchers have pointed to YouTube and the polarization that
But
the
thank God that's all
nationalist.
dying away now.
Yeah. So A Taste of Armageddon is a really, really, really great parallel to the way these algorithms play out in our daily lives, and we have no idea, Larry. We don't see it at all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we're just now becoming savvy to it. It's only been the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. I think it was the 2016 election that turned a lot of people on to, realizing the devil in the details or whatever. What was underneath the surface here? Just the same way. I go back. I compare social media a lot as a social effect to the A-bomb, because one of my favorite, the first documentary I was ever like, oh my, the documentary had a big effect on me, is The Atomic Cafe. And it's somewhere between tragicomic and bittersweet and insanely crazy and starkly scary. But they talk about the A-bomb in not just as a defensive weapon in global diplomacy and the Cold War, but the effect it had on people's popular psyche and how it went from, everything that was, cool and neat and new and hot was atomic, and all the silly, the songs and the movies and all that, into, as it sunk into people and had an effect on, the B movies, the sci-fi B monster movies, and then through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and, all the way to The Day After and all that. And the pop culture end of it to show daily, everything from military training films to commercials to songs of different era. Anyway, it was just really, and the real world going by behind it. It was all made up from clips and songs and you name it. And people's evolving thoughts and people being stressed out by it and, everyday Joe, being, in duck and cover and all that. So anyway, but it took 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and it was an evolving reaction to it. And finally, by the 80s and 90s, the anti-nukes movement came, and even Reagan talked to Gorbachev about it. And then,
Chernobyl.
Chernobyl
had a big
well,
impact
3 Mile Island. But, and those were even the end of this was made in 82. So actually, Chernobyl was after this, and 3 Mile Island had just barely happened. So anyway, that's a classic case of the technology happens, and even people at the beginning, it was like, oh, it's our savior weapon. It saved all these lives from, the super weapon that we didn't have to go conventionally with. And then people saw, well, maybe that was, they were both bad. It was a Sophie's choice, but it wasn't like this clean super weapon and clean power and all that. But the effect took a while to roll over the population. So, and that's what I see social media as. In the beginning, it was like, oh, look, we can plan our class reunion and I can talk to grandma. And then it was like, oh, and at what cost?
Yeah, this is
data as a product.
I think I think that's a really great parallel here, Larry. The atomic developments of the 20th century and social media of the 21st century. I'm going to reference the Social Dilemma again. The Social Dilemma references a science fiction author. I'm blanking on the name of that person, but the quotation is, with technology. I'm paraphrasing it, but with technology, it's going to be very unclear if we're headed towards a utopia or a dystopia until right about the finish line. Yeah. Well, you take atomic power, and there are incredible benefits to society in terms of the power that's created for a population. If the waste can be managed effectively, it's an incredible, largely safe source of power. Chernobyl was more of a psychological disaster in terms of the causes of it. Now, it had a huge environmental and human disaster, yes. But the things that caused it was that was a psychological error and a psychological problem that happened in terms of how groups work together. But nuclear power can be a very safe, largely clean source of power. At the same time, there's massive destructive ability of nuclear bombs, and the technology is very similar. very much the same way with social media. Social media, there's so many wonderful things that have come out of it in terms of the friends I've made, the people I've connected with, our quick ability to send a message that can somehow reach millions of people. And at the same time, was humanity ever set up for no eye contact, written contact with millions of people? No, we evolved in a way in which we interacted face to face with small groups of people.
Right.
So
at least that's the way you say we created. No, that's how we evolved too.
That's how we evolved. Yeah.
Now we're evolving, and it's probably happening at a faster pace than it used to. But
and that's the problem. Is like we do not evolve as quickly as our technology. And we evolve very slowly. Nature moves a little bit slower than technology does. And the other part of this, Larry, and this gets to sort of cancel culture and all of that. And
then we should probably mention some episodes again sometime.
Yeah, we should. Let me mention this last thing, and we'll transition back to Star Trek. And the comments is there are so many. It's been a great. You
keep talking because it's been a great time for me to catch up in the chat.
Yeah. One last thing I'll say is another challenge we're running into is what now happens when folks like you and I, hanging out here in California, can now immediately have a conversation with someone in South America and Australia and Asia, and how do we navigate the different languages, the cultures, the complete different perspectives on life when we're having a conversation online? I posted this comment on.
Did you make a cultural faux pas?
Well, I ran into a cultural thing where I made this joke on Twitter about how in America POC can mean people of color, but it can also mean point of or person. Oh man, now I'm gonna butcher my own joke. But basically, the whole thing is, I was in a meeting online for work where I thought someone said POC, meaning I thought they meant a person of color. They meant point of contact, and that person said we only need one POC on this, and I'm like, well, but you're a POC, I'm a POC. Should I leave? And they're like, no, you shouldn't leave, but I'm the POC. You're not the POC. And now I'm like, wait, do they not think I'm a person of color? And so it was this very much like who's on base kind of situation, right? And I posted, or who's on first. I posted on Twitter about this, and it kind of started a little bit of conflict because someone...
You went to Twitter before you realized what it was about, or after you?
No, I went to Twitter once I realized, and I was sort of asking people, when you hear POC, what comes up for you? And someone in Europe said, like, that's a very hateful term. I would never say person of color. And so this gets to like the problem with humanity when we have different cultures and different perspectives and different language, and now we're suddenly all thrown together. So let me stop right there because I've mentioned so much stuff.
If man were meant to instantaneously communicate globally, he'd have wings. Oh, wait, wrong. Okay.
Boy, that sounds very familiar, Larry.
Yeah,
I feel like you're referencing something I like. Let's go to the comments for a moment, Larry. Seems like you are
kinds of things, and we've only mentioned one episode.
We've only mentioned one episode. Yeah.
Of this, because part of this, and we're going to be at this all day, or at least the full 2 hours, because someone did kind of define the category broadly here, but there are tons. The original series is all about that. But any of your planets run by the supercomputer, whether it looks organic or whatever, analogish or whatever, is there. So a lot of people are mentioning some of the ones, and I guess you're on a boycott of showing imagery. But
no, I showed an image. I showed your image.
Did you show the Ultimate Computer? I mean, did you show Taste of Armageddon?
Well, you can't see right now, remember, because of the update. You can't see what I'm showing. But there, I'm putting it up again, but you can't see it.
Okay.
I would
thought-
never boycott
we
your
get
images.
Split screen after we went to. Wow, I can't hear the music now. I can't see the split screen. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
We got a lot of subspace interference.
So everybody,
between
when
you
I'm
and me.
ignoring your comments that he posts, I'm not seeing. I see the
You're not
originals.
seeing them. Yeah.
I see the.
yeah.
I'm not seeing squat. No, but I mean, the easy. A lot of people have mentioned, and the one that came to mind from original series was Hollow Pursuits, which is an easy one, which it combines the ability. We have addictions, but now we've got technology to amplify your option for addictions.
And I love the image I'm putting up here is Barkley in Hollow Pursuits and Jean-Luc as the Three Musketeers kind of. Yeah. Do we want to get into this? I mean, Barkley has come up a lot in the comments here. And
Gosh. But I also think, you also can think, and it wasn't typical, it was alien derived, but Nth Degree is the same thing. And then his ability to project a hologram, even on Voyager, he's able to make contact with them, and then he injects himself into the crew and is attached to that crew, good for them that he's doggedly working on their case, but it's kind of not the healthiest thing for him, apparently. But that's Broccoli. So.
That's Broccoli. So what I want to say about this, and we can do a much deeper dive into Barkley, because I think Barkley, I have a lot of criticisms about Barkley, but I also have a lot of love for Barkley.
Hold on.
Oh, plexing. I hate
which had nothing to do with
stuff.
him. It was, he...
Oh man, we should do a whole episode called "Ollie Hates Plexing." But when it comes to holodeck quote unquote addiction and the parallel here with video games now, I think before it was also a parallel to TV and film addiction and all of this. Larry, we're wired for connection. We're wired for connection with people, and when we don't have enough of that, sometimes we can get connected to things or situations or experiences. And what most people think of addiction is really just that, is you're struggling with connection. And what we see with Barkley is he is a rather a lonely person, and things go up and down over the course of his life, as we see in Voyager and briefly see in First Contact. But when we see him most struggling with his relationship to the holodeck, he is largely alone and isolated. And when it comes to some addictive problems we've seen, a lot of the early research on addiction, there's if you look at Vietnam War veterans who are coming back from the war, many of them became addicted to drugs when they were in Vietnam, when they're under heavy combat situations. Right. Most veterans coming back from the war, as they reintegrated with families and friends, most of those addictions completely disappeared. Now, some continue to struggle, and that could be for a variety of reasons. They had a hard time integrating back. It could be because of
the PTSD took over.
PTSD, so that was the other thing, and the drug use actually continued as a way of dealing with that. But the vast majority of people, the drug use ended, and there was no addiction. And a lot of the early research on animals. There were researchers who got animals addicted to things like cocaine, and where they gave them the ability to feed themselves drugs, and they found that the rats would overdose. Well, it took a few decades, but then some scientists went back to look at those rats and found that these rats were only in a cage where that was the only thing you could do, and they created what they called a Disneyland for rats, where they had They could socialize. They could run on the wheel and exercise.
Splash Mountain.
Splash Mountain. Yeah. They could
Tiki
do
room. Yeah.
the tiki room. Oh, that makes me want to get, what's it called? The pineapple drink.
Yeah.
At the tiki room.
It was the Dole pineapple, whatever.
The Dole Whip.
Yeah,
Dole Whip. Makes me want to get a Dole Whip. Anyways, they made this Disneyland for the rats, but still gave them the opportunity to have the drug. And when they created an engaging environment, most of the rats, they didn't go for the drug use. So again, we're wired for connection. And when we don't get enough of that from people, we might be vulnerable to getting that from things, experiences, or substances. So that's really what's happening with Barkley. There isn't anything, and linking that to screens, there's nothing unique about screens and screen time or video games that can make them particularly addictive. But when we don't have enough connection, sometimes we might get most of that from these different things and these different experiences.
Well, Lieutenant, too much of anything, even love, isn't necessarily a good thing.
Again, Larry, you're quoting something that sounds pretty good to me. It sounds pretty good to me.
That's fine. It's no trouble at all. Okay.
I see what you did there.
But we have so many episodes, so many people. And again, this thing is so multifaceted. Yeah, it's like 3/4 of all Star Trek episodes, I think, could fit into this.
Yeah.
But
they do tend to feature technology in Star Trek, I've noticed.
Okay. And then they apply it to create some kind of artificial dramatic situation that has to be resolved by the end of the hour, or at least by the end of the silly little mini streaming season. Who knew?
What a concept! It's almost like a self-contained episodic
underwater
journey.
No, that's something else. So yes, and the other, I mean, there's so many, but another classic one from TNG is The Game, which everybody's
let's talk about The Game.
But that was talk about activating the pleasure centers, and I went through a decade, not for myself, but for other people, where I had to learn all about all the things involved with ADHD. And that's when brain chemistry. Oh, okay. The pleasures, and now I've gone blank on them, but I keep wanting to say norepinephrine, but that's a drug, not a neurochemical. But the idea of neurochemicals and addictions tapping them, or other things tapping, where you live on that or you don't live on it.
Yeah. I mean, the game is wonderful for a lot of reasons.
It's like weaponized mental health.
Yes. Yeah. And I think things like Candy Crush,
social networks can be.
Yeah. So absolutely. So whether it is a social network or in social media, or it's things like Candy Crush or maybe World of Warcraft, what a lot of these experiences get very good at is giving you that reinforcing hit of pleasure right when you need it. And things like Candy Crush, they got very good at predicting when are people leaving the game and what to provide them to give them that pleasure dose so that they come back in.
That last iota, which is what the social network or social dilemma gets into.
Yeah,
you see them that goofy little dramatization. They let people. Oh no, he's about to leave. Oh no, quick! What'll quick? What will reel them back in? What is our nuclear option to keep them here? And bang.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways in which Facebook really hacked its growth, and this was it's a very my headphone just died on me. Let's try switching to secondary systems here and see if that works.
Try cross-circuiting to be. Yes.
What a great day of technology for. Okay. So what
it's stressing me out. Oh wait.
One of the ways in which Facebook really hacked its growth is it allowed people to upload photos and tag someone else, even if they weren't on Facebook. And so you would then receive an email that said, hey, Larry has posted a photo of you on Facebook, but it wouldn't show you what the photo is. And you would have to go online and create an account to see it. So it was really anticipation and pleasure are very connected in our brain. It's usually the anticipation of something pleasurable that is more hooking than the actual payoff itself. And like, who isn't going to join an account or create an account to find out, well, what did Larry post about me? I need to know this. I need to know what he's saying. What image is it?
It's the same thing as LinkedIn having the, who searched for you online? Who
Oh, yeah.
But you have to pay for the premium level to get that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
42 people pinged you. Who are they? You have to pay to get that. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a business model, and that's how they're making their money. Okay, but on my end of it, that's
It's manipulating. It's manipulating your thoughts and your feelings for a business purpose. We all feel this.
Well, then it must be okay then.
I think there's a good Kirk speech here too that you might be able to pull out of your hat. I mean, we all feel this, Larry. That if we map on your pleasure with Star Trek watching, usually the highest point of that pleasure, it's going to be right before it starts. And so all day you're kind of building anticipation of that new episode, and usually your pleasure, it's going to be right before you press play is the highest point. And a lot of these technologies manipulate that to hook you in. The other thing that video games do really well, and the game is a perfect example of this, they engineer what's called flow. So flow states are when time goes by very quickly.
I always think of Alice when you mention flow, but that's dating me. But go ahead.
Alice from Jetsons?
No, Alice from the series Alice.
Oh!
Alice doesn't
I
live
thought you were going to say
Florida,
Brady Bunch.
And flow was kiss my grits, flow. But go ahead. That's not what you mean.
Yeah. I am not picking up on those references at all. I thought you were going Brady Bunch. And, okay. All right.
And Vera with the straws. Okay, go ahead.
So, flow states. This is when time goes by very quickly. You're very absorbed in what you're doing. Your ability is very much meeting the challenge of the task. So sometimes we experience flow when we read a book. Sometimes we experience flow when we're watching a good movie. Sometimes we experience flow when we're doing in work. Yeah. Exactly. When I very much experience flow when I teach. I love teaching. Sometimes we experience it when we're live streaming, and then technology might break down, and that flow state is completely gone.
And we go for 20 minutes without mentioning an episode.
Right. It's usually
is this the same thing as hyperfocus? Because I hear a lot of the research I had to wind up doing talks about that. Is like you're in and sometimes that's great. You're in the zone, as O'Brien and
yes.
But sometimes it's not helping anything. You're just stuck. It's just
totally
for good. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned attention deficit disorder earlier, and we can kind of draw some parallels there with certain states. But flow is usually something you don't realize you're in until it's done because you're so absorbed in what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And video games, and as you see in the game, are very good at engineering flow states. You take the original Mario Brothers. The first stage introduces you to how the game works, the jumping mechanics. You get the mushroom. You get the mushroom very early, and then you get bigger. That's a big hit of pleasure right there. And then you learn how the game works. The second stage introduces a little bit more complexity. The next stage introduces a little bit more complexity. And every good video game is very good at getting you quickly absorbed and creating these flow states. And the game shows you that. The game, like moving that disc into the funnel thing, at first it's very easy. You learn the basics of it, but it gets harder and harder and harder. And they engineer flow. And sometimes some people might struggle with that if again, we were getting to connection earlier, if there's not enough connection in other areas of your life. Sometimes you might get pulled into that a bit too much.
Yeah.
And Larry, one more thing. There's so much I want to say, but
obviously,
Netflix, obviously, yes. Netflix, very good at this.
Very flowy. Yes.
Very flowy. They, at the very end, this gets to anticipation too. Netflix is very good at keeping you in the storytelling state that they create, because episodes usually of the original shows, they end and they create high anticipation and they immediately feed you into the next thing. There isn't that commercial break. There isn't the stop. There isn't the, hey, you want to go take a break from all of this?
And look at how more modern shows, not just the serialized shows, but they saw what Netflix was doing with old shows from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And just engineered to that. I mean, now you watch new streaming shows, and when you binge them, I noticed this. I had one series, Dead to Me, which I just died. I have not gotten addicted to very many shows at all, and that's one I had to watch. I had to basically binge it. But it's that flow is so adapt, because they even cut their own credits short, or they make them go. It's almost like they do it themselves and get you right in. And the credits, minutes, what's that?
Absolutely.
Right
and this is, folks, if you struggle with this, and sometimes you might have
Hollywood has followed Netflix showing them with old shows, so they just make the new ones even better at doing that.
Yes, and this is where the technology has changed. The ability to autoplay is the tech change there, where there is no break, where it kind of immediately goes forward, and creating that narrative hook where an episode ends with massive anticipation for what happens with the next one. That is storytelling changing and technology changing to create more absorbing experiences. And folks, if you struggle with this and you have spent a weekend time just binging.
There's a Portlandia sketch, and I'm not a big Portlandia watcher, but the one
I love Portlandia.
The one where the couple started to watch a show and
Battlestar? They watch Battlestar.
Yeah. Like 3 weeks later, they've all been fired from their job because late.
Next one. Yeah. That's a great episode. So the thing I want to say here is, it's not you, it's the system, folks. It's I think there's a great there's got to be a good Kirk speech about this too. Is like, we have created systems that get you hooked in. It's not a moral weakness of yours. It's technology has figured out how to overwhelm our most emotional, basic aspects of who we are.
And not to get all, whatever you hear about it, but I guess what are the motivations for doing that? Either just pure out capitalism and profit motive, or, hearts and minds and power.
Yes.
Just raw power. So between politics and the market, yay. And we should move on and have some more shows.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
Can I call out a couple of new names here in the chat?
Please.
I just went over that. So Wardogheim is going back and forth. He's talking about Future Shock and Alvin Toffler, saying this exact same thing about the future wave is going to happen more and more, and technology is going to be crippling to us in ways that we don't get because it's happening so fast, right? And Pixel Paradise, someone else maybe. These are both YouTubers. And by the way, somebody asked really early. Maybe it was Zahir on Twitch. If we look, we see the Twitch. We do see the Twitch comments, guys.
Yeah.
But Pixel Paradise was saying yes about algorithmically sharing. Says, I notice when I don't like a post of someone who usually posts something that they do like, Facebook will keep posting it to their feed until they finally do click like.
Yes. Yes.
And that when I first mentioned Taste of Armageddon, Pixel Paradise thought of Facebook. Like, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, we'd watch Taste of Armageddon and think, ooh, wow, computer war. Ooh, wow, that's science fiction-y, that's Twilight Zone-y. And to see it through the light of, to see something through the light, let 20 or 30 years go by and let culture let you see an original story in a different lens, it's just as powerful, but now you have a whole new, that's part of the greatness of Star Trek. But like Shakespeare, but I didn't say that. Every new generation can apply the same truths in a different lens. But so many episodes.
And I wanted to, I like this comment from Karen Hinckley, where she said that we are so manipulated, some good, some bad. And that gets back to that quotation I've really been thinking about a lot is it's hard to know if we're going towards a dystopia or a utopia because both things are happening simultaneously. I mean, Wikipedia is an amazing source of information. Information has become democratized in a way that was Larry, when in the 90s everyone was talking about the information superhighway and how this is going to change everything. We have the information superhighway now, and at the same time simultaneously we have the availability of all the information in the world at your fingertips,
and we
in
have
your
the
pocket
for all the misinformation in the world.
Exactly. And both are playing out at the same time. Karen, I love your comment here. We can nudge people in small ways. Like you can nudge people to save more money for retirement. You can nudge people to make healthier decisions. You can also nudge people towards feeling worse about themselves, getting stuck in a product. Both those things are possible, and both of those things have happened.
Those are insidious, but the insidious things are like, and I go back to the social dilemma again, the bit about like teenagers not getting as many likes, as if there's not enough to be insecure about being a teenager in the 40s or 50s or the 1850s. Now you can be insecure in mass globally with thousands of people looking when you don't get as many likes or your Instagram photo doesn't get as many likes as your best friends. And it happens over and over and over again. And it's, it's like,
yeah, this is where
just to not get a dance at the dance and be a wallflower. That was bad enough. But now the whole world can see it.
Well, and this is where,
over.
Larry, I think you and I are very fortunate that we did not have to grow up in an era of social media, because your brain is not finished developing until your mid-20s. It's normal as a teenager to make dumb mistakes, to try out different identities, for them not to click. What was not normal is for your temporary mistakes then to live on the internet, to get scaled up in a way that the whole school can see, for bullying, to now be able to continue. Larry, I'll never forget this.
Who knew all the blackface parties in the South would lead to so many politicians?
Oh my gosh. Well, a reckoning.
Your school yearbook. I mean,
a reckoning now that's happening of all of this. The one thing the first time I really realized how different my childhood was from what's happening now, I was treating a young patient, a middle school age individual who was being bullied at school. And in my appointment, in the quote-unquote sanctity, the safety of my office, these kids that were bullying him, they figured out how to make new phone numbers and new accounts. And they created en masse new Instagram accounts that he wasn't able to block enough quickly. He wasn't quickly able to block all these accounts, and they kept bullying, saying all these horrible things to him.
Are they like doing a resume for the Russian Internet Bureau or whatever? The Macedonian?
That's what they do. Yeah. And then, Larry, they kept calling him. They kept calling him over and over and over again in my appointment to harass him. And this poor kid did not know what to do. And the way a lot of social media companies have dealt with this is, well, it's the responsibility is on you to report these people so we can ban them. Well, folks, that doesn't work if you are getting harassed by hundreds or thousands of accounts. Or in this case of my patient, by like 3-4 people. Like, they were just sitting around somewhere, like deciding, hey, it'll be so much fun to torment this other kid. It's not on you to report all of this. These platforms need to make it a safe place for all of us to be around, and that has really lagged. Not that I have strong opinions about this by any means.
There's Jason Stoltz has a comment here, and it's like we've opened the hailing frequencies, but I'm sorry. As predictable and easily manipulated as this is at 1040, by the way. As predictable and easily manipulated humans are, no technology or algorithms can mimic the free choices and randomness we have offline. So as tech increases in our lives, it becomes a question of learning how to integrate this brave new world of tech into our lives successfully. I can't imagine how a time traveler in Trek would be able to mentally adapt and cope with all the changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Who said that comment, Larry?
Jason Stoltz.
Jason, I think that's really well said. And, I live in Silicon Valley. I work for a mental health startup. Technology is a big part of my life. And I really believe that we're not going to get anywhere here with this, Jason, until we have some regulation and requirements of technology. It is the only major industry in the United States that has no regulation. Air travel has regulation for safety. Automobiles have regulations for safety. You can't build an automobile without pollution checks, unless you're Volkswagen, and then you get caught, and then you're in trouble. Safety belts, airbags. Making an automobile is a heavily regulated industry because that protects the public. There are no regulations at all on your information, how your information is used, on privacy, on how tech companies can manipulate the way you feel, on how they can share data. The things I have learned working in tech now about how much companies are easily able to track who you are across the internet, what you buy, what your interests are. It's wild. Larry, many years ago, Facebook bought a VPN company out of Israel. And you might be wondering, why would a social media company buy an Israeli VPN company? VPNs allow you to have virtual private networks.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, they allow you to log into a different network. It basically is an easy way for you to be in America, but log into make it seem like you're a European account, and then you can watch Star Trek Discovery on Netflix. Things like that, right? Or you could watch Lower Decks. You can be in Europe and log into America over a VPN, and now you can watch Lower Decks.
Can I apply that to watching Lower Decks in Europe?
Yes, you could if you wanted to. Okay. That's also possible. Why would Facebook want to buy a VPN company? Well, what they did, Larry, is they bought the VPN company so they could see where people are going on the internet, and they could identify in the countries where Facebook is not popular, where are people going? What networks are they using? That's how they found WhatsApp, and that's why they bought WhatsApp, because they had access to data that showed them this other company is challenging you in these other markets, and then they bought them. There's no regulations anywhere around what tech can do. And until we change that, I think people like you and me and everyone here, we can't fight these larger systems that are created that manipulate how we feel every day.
We're sitting ducks.
We're sitting ducks. Yeah. You need to have some prime directives on what is being developed.
We're like Archer and Company. We don't know. We don't get it yet. Now, we're getting there, but until 4 or 5 years ago, people didn't get it. You had the visionaries who understood this, but other than that, average Joe in the street who was having it marketed to them all the time, didn't understand.
Pixel Paradise says regulation adds to cost, then cost becomes prohibitive. Well, when most of the stuff we use on the internet is free. Gmail is free. Social media is free. And what's funny about this... Yeah, I mean, what's funny about this is you think you're the user. No. You are what's being sold. Your information is what Facebook is selling to advertisers. Facebook is in the advertising business, and there is a strong consequence that we are now all facing as to never having paid for any of this. Larry, there's only... this is another quote from The Social Dilemma. We keep coming back to this. There's 2 industries that call their customers users: drugs and technology.
Yes, I'd forgotten that. Yeah. Dave makes a point. Hey, how about some more episodes?
Let's get back to some more Star Trek here.
How about some Star Trek here? Yeah, but this is such a brave new world here. A lot of us haven't, again, we're still figuring out, which is why we're all sitting ducks, why we're all such prime targets. We haven't thought through all this. This hasn't washed over us individually or as a whole. Here's one. We were hitting some. We said Arsenal of Freedom. You said Arsenal of Freedom.
Yeah.
Here's one though. Here's one that we didn't talk about, and it occurred to me. And talk about mental health. Devils do.
Oh yeah, this
if
is
you
a
think
good.
About Ardra as a con man who's using technology, she's using the pretense of being a god, and this otherwise well-adjusted, post-war, we can talk to them society, no prime directive worries, but they still fall prey to this person saying that they're one of their ancient gods come back. It's almost like a malignant version of the clone that the Klingon clerics raised of Kahless. It might as well have been the same thing.
Yeah.
Except they weren't nefarious. The clone of Kahless wasn't trying to, make a buck off of the Klingons. But it's the same kind of. That just dawned on me. But they have to expose this as just another technology user who happens to have done research, on their planet to come in and push all their buttons, literally.
Yes.
And then they expose them. But that society was ready to hand over its freedom for this old fear.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. I didn't think about that until you sent the images here, which I displayed. I love this episode. I'll put that image up again. I really love this episode, and I never thought about it as a technology story, but it absolutely is. And now looking at it from a 2021 lens, I see it very differently in terms of how technology can be used to really turn up the dial on fears, how it can be used to manipulate large populations in elections, especially.
I think I'm onto something here, Ollie. The reinterpretation. I think
you're onto something, Larry.
Because Devils Do, the whole point of it was just an updating of The Devil and Daniel Webster, or The Devil Went Down to Georgia, if you're a big Charlie Daniels. But now it's like, it's not just enough to say they made a deal with the devil. It's like, but who was the devil really? Oh, the devil was manufactured. Oh, just like Facebook.
And and news and media and just in how easy it is now to with technology like machine learning. Machine learning is taking a lot of data and being able to link different variables together and understand how these things are connected. Now it's very easy to pick a group of people and see, okay, what messages resonate with them, and sort of back engineer a platform that you can use to really appeal to these people in very much the same way that Ardra does.
I think we should say.
Target them. Yeah. Linda kind of says it well, as Ardra is a flim-flam man, which I love. I love the reference here.
Yeah.
And a lot of our tech can allow for what Ardra does in a very simple way, without as much flash as the whoosh, all the changing that she's able to kind of project. It's not as flashy, but it has the same effect of profoundly changing the emotions of a society and leading them to one direction or another. That's a great pick, Larry. Not one I would have really thought about.
I was looking at titles and thinking, but I was trying to think more of like societies being affected broadly, not so much individuals being affected like one-to-one, even though the effect, they may be one of a group, but the story focuses on one versus the story focuses on, the planet of the people scared by the fake god. But anyway,
how about, Larry, a positive example? We've
there are none.
There, I think we're experiencing one right now, and I think there's a wonderful episode. I think Jared mentioned this very early on. That's the wrong one. No, that is the right one. You picked a very interesting image to use of this one. Probably the least positive part of that.
What?
The sound of her voice.
We're blind here. Oh, well, to me, the point of the whole sound of her voice is that you'll say this. When I think of the sound of their voice, it's like the whole disappointment and, she died and this was all big disappointment. Let's give her a funeral and remember her. That's the sound of her voice to me. But okay.
The sound of her voice to me is how magical and profound it is in Star Trek that they can instantaneously have communication across space, and the sound of her voice also mentions across time as well. And now, while we can't have communication across time in the way that they can in Star Trek, we can across space. Like right now, you are in Southern California.
that.
I am in Northern California. People here are we're having conversation across continents instantaneously, with the exception of some internet stuff that kind of happens.
Or the international date line, but yes.
Yeah, but it's amazing that we can have this instantaneous connection, and this is the more utopia side. I find the sound of her voice to be a very very
Uplifting.
hopeful. It's I find it uplifting because the crew of the Defiant were able to keep to give some connection to someone else who would have never been able to have it because of how alone she was. And yes, while we find out that she's died years ago, the crew of the Defiant was still there to give her connection and to keep her memory alive going forward, to give those last moments of her life some meaning.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's a strong parallel here to COVID-19 and how alone and isolated people are in ICUs. And the only connection they really have in some of their unfortunate last moments is because of the internet. Yeah. I see it as incredibly hopeful and optimistic.
It's almost
even
like
though it has that end.
There's a whole new lens to apply to this episode years later.
That is the most amazing thing I am finding about Life Support Live, Larry, is these stories have such staying power and new ways of understanding them, like devils do. I would have never have thought about that. And I love that episode. That is the beauty of Star Trek, folks. You can keep coming back to it and get new meanings out of it.
And I'm sitting here thinking that I struggled a little bit to come up with today's K3. Stay tuned, everybody, for the K3 factor. But I just dawned on me I could have done a whole K3 just on Ardra.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. So we did Deep
levels.
Space Nine.
Let's do more Deep Space Nine. Here's another one that I didn't mention last night because it's the antithesis of this: the effect of mental health, the effect of technology on mental health. What about the effect of running away from technology on mental health? And boom, paradise.
Oh yeah.
What about the effect of trying to get away from technology's bad effects, perceived?
Yes.
Yes. And how that, when her little colony is awoken to the fact that what's her name's been tricking them, that some of them are like, oh, thank you for saving us from this. And the other, I could have been with my grandkids back on, Mickey Mouse 3 or whatever. I mean,
yeah.
There's a pendulum swing even to trying to deal with the negative effects of technology, and you do wipe out the positives, or we can deal with that, overarch, which I thought was interesting, but that's a mental health reaction to technology.
Absolutely. I think that's also like Devils Do, not one I really thought about until you sent these images over, Larry, and I think that's a really great point. So many people right now talk about, well, I'm going to go on a little cleanse, a technology cleanse. I'm going to take a week's break from social media. And it's quite difficult to do that. It's so much of how people communicate. Like, the only reason I'm still on Facebook is, number one, if you make any content, like as you and I both do, you kind of need to be on the platform to be able to share it with other folks. Mm-hmm. But the reason why I still have a personal account is there are some people in my life where if I wasn't on Facebook, I wouldn't be able to see their updates or be in touch with them, because that's the only
I would be able to tell 18 people a day happy birthday, even though I would have kept telling 20 people my whole life happy birthday. Now I can tell 5,000 people every day.
Yeah, it's hard to take a break from these things. And then there's also cultures like in the United States. A big example is the Amish culture, which has sort of decided that we're gonna stop right here in terms of technology development, and we're gonna live our lives in a more traditional way when it comes to technology. We're not gonna use electricity. We're not gonna use any of this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of cultures and a lot of religions around the world where they do take more of a hard line on technology and what they use and when they use it and how they use it.
Or their
And
governments do it for them.
or the governments do it for them. Yeah. North Korea is one that comes to mind, and the consequences there of
various states of Middle Eastern countries and China and Russia, and yeah,
the great firewall of China. Exactly. Yeah.
I hadn't heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that's a great episode, Paradise. I think we need to get into a little bit of Voyager here.
Yeah.
And there's one that's come up in the comments, and one that you mentioned as well to me, Larry, and that's the thaw.
Which didn't occur to me at first until I started thinking last night. Yeah, I think we did less planning up front, and I was like thinking about. I actually had to think this week, Ollie. I want you to know. I was sitting there last night. That one.
I love everything you've come up with for today's episode. Now, this episode is very scary for me, or at least it was when I very first watched it. What's the tech connection here, Larry?
Well, I mean, everybody comes away from the thaw thinking of the clown. You know, was the clown Lenny or was the clown Squiggy? I forget. Anyway, Michael McKean. But the whole thing was, it was the personification of a virtual reality environment that was connected to some people's brains. You forget what, and I was going back and reviewing. It's people who were trying to survive a planetary environmental catastrophe, and they went underground, and they had to outlast some, toxic nebula or something, or a solar flare. They had to be in suspended animation for in cryostasis for 15 years. And so they just took up a thing to keep their brains active. They did the tech, and there were only 15 survivors, which was helpful on a pod building budget. But of the survivors, what happened was the algorithms and the support mechanisms they made took over, became a self-sustaining entity that, created out of their fears of dying, I guess, is what the negatives won out. And so this whole virtual environment, to the point that it would not let them, they were 4 years past their deconnection. When it was safe to come out wherever they were. This clown persona wore a crown, and all the people that inhabited it was a bizarre, thing, because it's made up of their subconscious. But it was very real in that if somebody wanted to leave, they would, in this virtual reality, like threaten to kill them or kill them, and their body would react. And they finally pulled out a threat. The leader of them that we saw at Voyager, of course, the super techies all figure out a way to virtually get hooked up and go into the same environment, and then they're trapped, and then they use the doctor to get in because he's off the grid, and they finally do defeat this and shut it down, and they're able to rescue all but one of the people who had been afflicted, these survivors of this world, which to me seems like they'd be way under the gene pool and would never have any hope of repopulating anyway. But that's just but it was the gruesome climax is when the leader of the group. They have a guillotine, which is pretty terrifying, of all the ways to kill someone. And the real life body in the pod has a heart attack, and that, it doesn't lose its head, but it has a heart attack and dies because of the neural connection.
Yeah.
So it was like neural interface terrorism. I mean, that you created yourself out of your own mind and your own fears, and that was the point of it. Our fear, and then Kim is even channeling FDR and trying to say the only fear we have is fear itself, and You know
what?
You're back to OK Corral gunfight territory then.
The thaw is it's quite a scary episode, and I think it's such a bold episode. So early on in Voyager 2, was that a season 1 or 2?
No. It was like late 2 or 3 at the latest, but it may.
Yeah. It's still it was still earlier on in Voyager.
Yeah, second season, late second season.
Yeah. To me, the thaw, when I think about it, it's there is this tech angle, of course, but it's also Star Trek. It shows the diversity of the stories that we see in Star Trek, where we have these. It feels much more like Twilight Zone, and it feels like Twilight Zone or Black Mirror. It feels like a little bit of both of those things. And that's something I love about Star Trek is it's a big playground. We can have episodes like The Thaw. We can also have very silly, fun episodes, which Voyager does as well, which all of them do very well. I'm trying to think of if there's any real world technology right now that is similar to The Thaw. And I'm kind of drawing a blank, but maybe that's because, again, I was so freaked out when I first saw this episode, and my mind's like, "Don't go there, Ali. Don't do it."
Well,
Larry,
it sure gave the crew a chance to use all those paint colors they'd never ever use. Palette, all that unused paint sitting around for 30 years, they finally got to use up that leftover 80s stuff, 90s stuff.
There's I'd love to talk about two of the more recent series, and then maybe we can kind of move forward in the show.
Yeah, I that's Voyager. Another one real quick was Lineage, because the technology being able to change.
Oh, sure.
Her baby gave B'Elanna all. That was a case of individual, but she had all kinds of stress. If she didn't have the technology to do genetic manipulation, she never would have been so stressed out about She might have still been stressed out about it, but she had a whole new level of stress because of a tool.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so there are real world and near real world parallels to that. Right now, cosmetic manipulation, cosmetic surgeries are at the point where you can very much change the way you look to match what your ideal of beauty might be. And a lot of American ideals of beauty have been broadcast in so many different parts of the world, where people are trying to change the way their eyes look, the way their noses are shaped, their skin color to match these larger ideals of beauty, which is something I think B'Elanna is experiencing as well with her Klingon ridges and the way she was teased and bullied, and her sense of her body image and her worth. So there's those real-world parallels, and there's also the near-world parallels with genetic engineering and technologies like CRISPR, the long-term consequences of, well, what's going to happen if we can genetically alter at the point of conception or near conception how people look and what'll happen. Gattaca is a wonderful movie that explores this in depth about designer babies and what's the consequence to a society where you can change your genes. So great find as well, Larry. Larry, you pulled some really great.
Well,
great
it was
here.
You made me think, and I'm sorry about the image. I'm reading now. I'm catching up in chat, and everybody was like booing me for sound of her voice. But like I've said, to me, the sound of her voice is the Twilight Zone reveal at the end, and she's not really alive.
It is.
She
It
died
is that too.
years ago. Oh, I mean, but that's the whole build. They fill up 40 minutes of everybody getting off and getting an oar across the long distance. And it's a Star Trek. We're coming to rescue. We're coming to the rescue. Oh, you died 20 years ago. Wah, wah. Okay. That's under. But I love this show. I mean, it's an awesome show. They do hook you in. You're right there with them.
And the actress too is so fantastic.
Yes. They give her credit for all the voice work, and she's
Let's go a little silly, and then we'll kind of wrap up on Star Trek Picard. But let's talk about Lower Decks.
So we were going, well, what about Discovery? And if anybody has a Discovery angle, please throw it in here. But I mean, there's obviously lots of ways technologies affect. But as far as like being a story point, I'm sure there's one there. But I was getting tired at 2 a.m. But Lord, and I was blurring them all together, although with the exception of Picard, we've got that coming. But Lower Decks, it was like blah, 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 blah. Oh, wait, because I can handle 2 birds with 1 stone. And have you got it up? Did you put it up?
Yeah, I just displayed it. Yeah.
Look, it's Landru Part 2. It's like not only was Landru, I mean, it gets the Lower Decks treatment, but it's like not only was Landru addicting for that addicting, but he came back. It cycles back, and one guy and the guy in the scythe. I just love that. But that's a comic line for just because we get away from something addictive or harmful to us that's so insidious. You know, Landru was just as good as I don't know, cigarettes or Facebook. It's something that you dropped, or that cult you were in, and you cycled back. Whatever.
I think. Well, you mentioned cigarettes and smoking and vaping now, so it's that's what's great about that moment in Lower Decks is if you don't make the cultural and societal and systemic change, we're going to be vulnerable to those exact same problems again.
They still dress the same after 100 years. Little dirty.
Like, they turned off the computer and they stick on that sticker, Starfleet, do not obey, right? But there wasn't the larger cultural change that was needed to happen, and so they fall into the same pattern again. So I think that's
a little both sign of Landru's name on it, just in case you forget.
Yeah. That's Lower Decks being both very funny and having some good commentary as well.
Shorthand commentary, bang, yeah.
Shorthand, yeah. Well, you only have 25 minutes, Larry.
Yep.
And it's Picard.
Manic pace on Lower Decks. Have you noticed?
So let's talk about Star Trek Picard.
Yeah, that's what you secretly wanted to talk about all day. Because we need to move along.
There's a lot I could talk about all day today.
Guys, just in case you didn't realize this, if any of you happen to be new, we have a structured show. We've been doing our briefing room here, and Ali goes into the counselor's log and talks about cases. But you have been counselor's logging all day already.
I know. There's been a lot of counselor's logging today. But the only thing I want to say about the image here I've got is of these synths that Siths, not Siths. That's the other one. Synths, who are sort of the disposable. They're the disposable labor that is doing a lot of the grunt work at Utopia Planitia, the spaceport, not the spaceport, the shipyards on Mars. And I did want to draw a parallel here to how technology has created, in the cases of Amazon, for example, there is now an invisible workforce that you do not see, but is behind in places like the United States. You press a button, you can get an Amazon delivery, depending on where you live, the same day, the next day. There are a lot of consequences to that behind the scenes of the workforce that is...
especially in the pandemic.
Especially in the pandemic, that is making those low costs possible for you, but you do not see. We do not see. These are not brick and mortar
It's like we've got
stores.
Our own Chinese, Vietnamese sweatshops right here.
And
only
around the world,
sweatshopping to make it. They are.
Well,
but they're sweatshopping to deliver it.
The criticism that Apple got with it's the employees that are constructing the phones, and we don't really see all of the labor that contributes to the technology we use every day. And I think that's an angle of Star Trek Picard that I didn't think about until you and I were talking.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. And now that in Star Trek Picard has like a lot of different storylines when it comes to tech, but this one I think is one that has a strong parallel to right now, every day. What happens to an invisible workforce that is 100%, the technology is 100% reliant on them. What happens when they're trying to mobilize and exercise some basic human rights and employment rights and labor rights? Amazon has very much squashed any organization of its labor force for this exact same reason that we see in Star Trek Picard. The treatment of the synths and is not good. Similarly, folks have to walk miles in these factories to be able to take a bathroom break. They get 10 minutes to take this break. The treatment of the workforce is really, we call them essential workers, but we treat them as anything but, Larry. Yeah. And it's
the irony of that. There's a comment here from Jason Stoltz back at 11:15. Jason said, in the Enterprise episode, they left a communicator behind. Imagine if they accidentally left a social media website behind.
Oh my gosh.
I'll see your translator and raise you, cultural.
That could be a great Lower Decks episode. I could see them
doing that. I don't want to cross streams here, but one thing that the Orville did in first season was they did and I can't remember the title now, but they did their great commentary on social. It's one of the first times I actually took the Orville seriously was what they did as social media. They basically did the social dilemma as an episode where one of their crew jumps into society where everybody is liking everything, and your legal status is depending on, much less your social status is depending on how your likes and all that are. And if you do something stupid, you can plunge and everybody hates you, and you might even be, thrown in the cooler or something.
A couple of great comments here. Charlotte mentions Measure of a Man in Star Trek Next Generation, one of my favorite Data episodes, and how that previews a little bit of what we see in Star Trek Picard. And then Chris Tucker mentions the Cloud Miners comes to mind with all of this, which I think is a great pull right there as well. And Christoph loves that social media episode of Orville. Larry, should we do a little brief counselor's log and jump into the K3
Sure.
as well?
A little, only if it's a little.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've mentioned a lot of different things here today. The counselor's log is when we do a little bit of a deeper dive into what we're talking about. I mentioned a lot. There's a few things I haven't mentioned that I just want to jump into. We haven't really mentioned inhumane online interactions and why that might be, why it's so easy for us to have really horrible arguments online. And some of the research on that, it's something called the online disinhibition effect, which basically means when we're online and interacting with each other, it's like the brakes are off on a lot of what we say.
The ODE.
The ODE, yeah, not to be confused with the ODN. Don't cross the optical data net with this. It's the eye contact. It's not that you're anonymous. It's not that you're not using a real name. It's the lack of face-to-face eye contact that seems to be most predictive of some of the bad behavior that we do online and that we're all capable of. A few other things I want to point to is every social media platform, you can never scroll to the bottom of it. It's an endless scroll.
It's a bottomless pit.
It is a bottomless pit. And you compare this with something like the New York Times. When you use that app, you reach the bottom. And when you reach the bottom, there's a feeling of it's done, and it's easier to put it down. But whenever technology makes it hard to stop, like when there is an endless scroll, it's our mind doesn't really register that it's done.
Or binge watching of a large series.
Or binge watch. Exactly. Yeah. So those endless experiences make it easy to stay plugged in to these kind of things. And the other thing I want to mention that I haven't mentioned yet is a lot of these technology. I kind of mentioned you get notifications and things like Candy Crush that give you the hits right as you're about to leave. The other thing that happens is on platforms like Snapchat, there's streaks, which are communication is they want to keep you direct messaging your friends, and they have this streak of how long you've been communicating. That's completely created to incentivize you to keep coming back, and because you don't want to break the streak.
Well, and getting to record other things that tell you your face, like your Apple or I guess the device, not an app. Your screen time was up 2% or down 2% this week or whatever.
I could have a whole thing about that and how unhelpful it is because there's no meaning and no context behind it, but I'll save that for another episode. So I think I've mentioned a lot of what I want to say in the counselor's log, so I'd rather go warp factor 9 right into the K3 factor today.
Well, here's a K3 factor. I'm going to split the focus. So if you put up, and again, I'm flying. I don't like this at all. Flying. Somebody said technology is spelled differently in the frame.
I know.
Do the frames.
I don't think it's a frame. I think it's the episode title. Technology is spelled technology.
Oh, okay.
We are two technology guys. So that's. I'm gonna retcon that. That was meant to be, folks.
That was meant to be. So, yeah, so guys and gals, the K3 factor is the nod to we take our theme of the week, and I do a deep dive into what I do, yay, into Star Trek background here that we do all across Trekland. And K3 is the one mention of mental health that's emblazoned in canon because it's on McCoy's BioBid monitor. But, yeah, so this effect of technology on society. So I had to go individualistic because I didn't, the Star Trek family of creatives, and even as a mass company, something we look at. And I'm sure that if I thought long enough, big effects of technology, like the coming of digital. The last year of Enterprise was the first year they were digital, and like a lot of conventions
in terms of
went
shooting.
Away. Yeah.
They instead of film, they shot digitally.
That's why if you watch the credits for the last season of Enterprise, did I say Discovery?
I don't know what you said.
Okay.
I heard Enterprise.
Okay, good. Then the last season.
My mind heard Enterprise.
There's a credit for I think it's Sony cameras. Okay, because they did a deal to get it. They got a deal.
Yeah.
I know a guy at Sony. They did a deal to get a cheap rate in return for a credit. Okay, great.
And I want to say about the Sony cameras, one of the reasons why they became a little bit cheaper was actually because of Star Wars and how Star Wars was making a big push to shoot digitally for episode 2 and 3. So we do have Star Wars to thank for bringing down the cost of digital filmmaking.
No, we don't. We're not. No. What year was that? Was that like 02, 03, 04?
Early 2000s, yeah.
Okay. Well, then it predates the 04, 05. Here, they're in the same vein, maybe at the same time they did this. Anyway, they all went all digital, and a lot of the conventional, that just blew my mind. It's like, you mean they're not having to do VHS dailies for all the producers to stick in their VCRs, and they can just send them a file now on computer, and everybody, digitally. There's no runners running around, with boxes of VHS tapes. And at Video Village on stage, there's not big honking TV screens and people with a playback machine. It's just one little flat screen and a couple little, which is now what you see when you see a director stand at a shoot, right? Anyway,
you don't even have to be in the same place now. You can get the dailies around the world.
Well, that would be helpful, like in a pandemic sometime or something.
Yes.
But the point is that was like an obvious kind of big effect. I was thinking in a personal way the effects of technology, and I thought of two very distinct different people, and both of them writers. And one of them who's no longer with us. But the first one there, I have a picture of Michael Piller at his desk.
Yep, I'm putting on the image right now.
And a very personal thing was, as the technology, as our digital, we went from word processors to just computers that would do, anything. Michael, in the early days, like when they first got off typewriters and word processors, which I think is what Gene and Next Generation started with. And I'm not talking about the old original because they were all typewriters, obviously. And they would go to Mimeo instead of the copy shop. But when they started to digitize, everybody was using, more people, before Microsoft Word was the predominant word processor, and now there's spinoffs and nobody cares. But WordPerfect was the original big one, especially on Macs.
Yep.
And people all typed in most of the writers coming in used WordPerfect. And to make that into scripts and use the script, there was an overlay app. There was an app called Scripter that had its own codes, and basically any writer could write in WordPerfect, and then they would run it. The script staff, Jana Wallace and then Lolita, those people, and then my wife Janet eventually, and the guys on DS9 would run their WordPerfect scripts through Scripter and use certain codes and convert everything over so it would look good on a page and all that. So I have all these discs of TNG scripts, especially, that are in Scripter that nothing can read now. But it took that. But the reason then, as time went on, and as the new kids, the new guys, the young bucks, Ron and Ron Moore and Renee Faria and Narain Shankar and Brannon and Brian. All of that, as long as Michael Piller was running the show up until the middle of Voyager, technology swung hugely in that 10 years or so, and all the younger guys were wanting to just use Final Draft, or they were just wanting to use some, whatever, and let's pick one and all use it. And as long as Michael was running the show, he didn't want to learn a new software, so everybody kept writing in WordPerfect. And then all the script people, I started to say the script girls, which is horrible. The script department had to keep learning Scripter and sticking it. By the late 90s, this was like getting more and more problematical. But anyway, it didn't change until the showrunner changed. And then finally it was like, okay, yes, we can do this. But it was kind of a throwback. And at the same token, I've got Ira in there. So Ira Bear,
putting up that image right now.
If you notice the script credits, Ira almost, he had some solos, but he almost always wrote first with Robert Hewitt Wolf, and then he wrote after Wolfie left, about 4 or 5 shows in to go seek his fame and fortune on his own. He teamed up with Hans Beimler, who actually used to be partnered with Ricky Manning when they were at TNG and the rest of their career, and then they split and went separate ways as solo people. But Hans and Ira wrote together after Robert left. And part of that was not that Ira couldn't write a script by himself, was Ira never, at least back now, since he has, but in the DS9 days, Ira wrote totally on long yellow pads. And part of the reason that he wanted a partner in the room, aside from bouncing ideas off, but he didn't have to, but he kind of got into that, was the other person, like as they were brainstorming and writing, the other person was doing the typing. And Ira was doing, long now he has since, but at pre-1999. But anyway, but that's a thing of how different people and their mental health, their work style, their creative ability reacted to the onset of technology in different ways. So anyway, I don't know if that quite gets at what we're talking about, but
I think it does. And I'm putting up the last image,
I knew
Larry.
It would be something new to 90. I don't know who else aside from 7 or 8 people I might know would know all this. Well, probably more than that. Probably 20 people.
I'm putting up the last image here, the K3, which has the whole has more of the DS9.
So the whole DS9. This was the season that Wolfie left, and I'm trying to think. I can't see it to identify it. I should have kept that up. But anyway, Hans is sitting over at the side, kind of on the chair arm, and Wolfie has a goatee, but they all have goatee. They all grew beards together in solidarity for a while. Anyway, he's second or third from the left. I think.
Well, do we know what they do now? I imagine it's some version of Google Docs. The ability to collaboratively write documents is.
I haven't talked in depth to anybody on the current staffs, but I know that Juan Carlos Fernandez, who was the last one of the Berman era as a script coordinator, is still doing that job, and he started writing himself. And the last thing he worked on was, well, maybe not the last. He worked on Scandal, I know, because that was a Mary Howard show too. But he was telling me about what the modern era looks like with the script flow. There's no paper. Nobody uses paper except for the day of. And they do little mini scripts now. No one goes, big, which is sad. You don't have huge reams of dead material. But
even script supervisors, any set that I've been on, the script supervisors all on iPad now, and they're all checking it in real time in tablets, and it's amazing what you can do now.
There's your K3. My goal every week is to tell you something you didn't know, whether it's a shock or not. At least it's something you didn't know. So there you go.
Larry, I was shooting something like 5 years ago, and I was reading off a teleprompter. I didn't like one of the lines. I gave feedback. The script supervisor changed it on her iPad. It immediately updated on everyone's script, including the directors and the teleprompter. It's amazing how quickly now things can move.
And it simultaneously changed the visual effect they did 2 months earlier in Santa Monica. No.
That is something that you can do now thanks to the Mandalorian, the real advancement that they've done in the dome real-time special effects that they create, which is now being used on Star Trek Discovery Season 4 as well. Another example of us benefiting from Star Wars special effect innovation.
Well, a way that technology has affected my mental health is it's just like the scene in First Contact. It was so cool to go to ImageG and the model shops and see the models on filming.
Yeah,
and CGI, you go talk about that, and it's a bunch of guys and some gals sitting in front of computers. It could be any friggin' industry in the world. So yeah, it was so cool to see the actual models up there on stands. But oh well.
Yeah, I never got to see ImageG. I always kind of dreamed of that, watching Next Generation. But seeing the original Enterprise model.
You can go to the Titan II Museum in Arizona and touch the Phoenix-ish.
Well, I never got to touch, but you can. The Enterprise, the original 1701, no bloody A, B, C, or D, or E. Or J, you can see it at the Air and Space, the main entryway. It's right there, fully
It's
restored, and it's
away right
beautiful.
now, but it's only because they're remodeling the entire gallery, but it's supposed to be back. Yeah,
The
it's
Milestones of Flight Gallery. Yeah.
right.
You know, Larry, I lived in DC. I went to grad school in DC, and before they moved it there, it was in I looked for it one day, and it took me like 5 tries of asking someone where it is, and they finally told me it was in the gift shop.
In the basement?
In the basement gift shop, and it was not restored, and it was really hard to find.
It was the crappy 1990 restoration that nobody liked, but
Yeah.
that's the political win. This is fake. This isn't a real rocket or plane. Why is it even here? Because it was, yeah, and they've come back around. Thank you, Margaret Heitkamp. They've Margaret for back to the realization that the inspirations of real life scientists and engineers and technologists is almost as important, which was the original reason the Smithsonian took it.
Yes.
So,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And now it's right there in exactly where it belongs in Milestones of Flight. Larry, I've got a quick away mission for folks,
Yes.
and then we'll kind of.
These are those tips that you offer in light of today's theme.
Yeah. I've got a lot. I've got a lot that I want people to kind of think about, and there's a few things that there's. It's very hard to resist the impact of these big technological changes, but there are very small things that you can do to make your life just a little bit easier. And I'm a big fan of making, of being lazy, of being. I feel like you're trying to engineer one of those thumbnails, our thumbnail react kind of thing.
No, I was just trying to get away from technology for just a few seconds.
Oh, I see. I see what you did. I see what you did there, Larry. There's a few things that
Aesthetic distance. Okay.
I'm a big fan of making change, of making it lazy, of making it easy for things to make changes that then have continue to give you some benefits. So the first one is on YouTube, on Netflix, on Hulu, whatever you watch, turn off autoplay. It's not easy to do. Sometimes you have to go digging around in the settings. Sometimes they'll only let you do it on a computer and not through the Netflix that's connected to your TV. But most of these platforms do allow you to turn off autoplay. And if you're struggling with the binging and the watching of the next episode, turn off autoplay, and I guarantee you'll have a net reduction in how much you're unintentionally binging shows. Now, if you want to sit down and watch like 3 episodes of something and have a good time, go for it. But if you find yourself struggling with that you're not making the decision, the software is making a decision for you, turn off autoplay. And look up how do I turn off autoplay on Hulu, on Netflix, on YouTube, and there's many guides on how to do that. That's number 1. Number 2 is audit your notifications. Larry, we kind of talked about anticipation and how once your mind is kind of stuck on what happens next, it really wants to alleviate that anticipation. Do not give any app permission to completely interrupt you in your day unless you really want it to.
Alerts and notices?
Yes.
Turn those off?
Get rid of all notifications except the ones that are most critical to you. I did this a few years ago, and it was so beneficial to my mental health because we're giving these apps complete permission to go, hey, stop. You stop doing this thing. This really important thing just is happening right now. There's a deal on Amazon for, $3.99 for this like shampoo that you use. Really? Or hey, stop. Great opportunity on Candy Crush right now. Or, breaking news, this thing is happening that's not really relevant to you. I recommend people only turn on notifications for the real critical things. So I have notifications on my phone for text messages, for phone calls, and for like 1 or 2 other apps that are really critical. I turn them off for most of my social media. I turn them off for every news kind of thing. I turn them off for every game, all of that sort of stuff. Audit your notifications so it's only the stuff. And email. Yeah, I get hundreds of email messages a day. I couldn't keep up with my notifications if I gave it permission for that. So please, folks, audit your notifications and only give something permission when it's really critical for it to be able to do that. And then the last thing, so turn off autoplay, audit your notifications, and the very last thing is, and you don't have to do this all at once. Pick the thing that might give you
Each
the
one
most
of these
help
may
right
take
now.
30 minutes on its own, so yeah.
Yeah. So just pick the thing that might give you the most benefit right now. The last thing is to really audit your feed. So really take a good look at who you're following on Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook. Who is adding?
LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. Yeah. Who's really adding to who's adding value to your life? Who makes you angry in a way that is not helpful? Who do you want to stay in contact with? Who don't you? Someone earlier mentioned my algorithm gives me just dog and cat videos on YouTube, and that's great. I like that. That's great, folks. Take some time. There's a lot of people I'm connected to on Facebook that I've had to mute, so I don't see updates from them because of how the posts that they post are create. I don't like what they do to my mind. They make me angry. They make me upset.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm trying to change.
Larry, stop posting all those Star Wars memes on Facebook. No, Larry, I follow Larry all the time. But there's folks that I want to stay connected with, but I can't see their stuff because it doesn't do good stuff up here. So mute them or unfollow them. I mute very liberally because of I don't want to go on these platforms, and I don't want it to just crossfire my brain into feeling now horrible, angry, and upset. The same thing with if there's terms that are very triggering for you, political terms, you can block them. On Twitter, you can block certain terms. There's also browser plugins that you can do to kind of block some of the stuff that might be very triggering for you in upsetting ways. You can also train some of these algorithms. You can train the YouTube algorithm to don't give me this kind of stuff, or you can reset it and kind of start fresh too. So really take some time to curate your feed when you're feeling good, so that you're reducing the chances of some of this more problematic stuff coming up for you at a later point in time.
These are all good. Have you done a video on this topic? You should.
That's a great idea, Larry.
Why
have I not done that?
Why
have I not done
because
that?
First I was going to say, if we had has someone done an art, because this is getting techie, and we're laughing about it takes you 30 minutes, because they intentionally hide this stuff if they even allow it at all. But
I'm literally putting this in my to-do list right now.
Literally?
Yeah, right now.
Look,
literally. And don't call me Shirley.
But literally, I was going to say, is this Googleable so that people could give a link? Maybe we can put a link on the page to articles that would go through, because it is techier and it's helpful to have a to-do list and all that. And then I thought, well, here's something you should just do in another award-winning psych show video.
It's a great idea, Larry.
Are you basically done with your list? I don't want to cut you off, but there's some.
I was just gonna recap autoplay, notifications, and curating your feed. That's it. That's all I got. That's my away mission, folks.
Here's some. So we're into full bore hailing frequencies here for the last.
Let's open them up.
Well, in case you hadn't noticed, they've been pretty open the whole show, but we invite that. No, there's a whole slash of a whole crunch here at the 11:27 mark by this timer. So before I ask this one, because it was a repeat, so Nathaniel obviously must mean it. Jesse Taggart on Facebook says, "Hey, on Discovery there is the Kelbian tech interface that identified Gray as a separate entity, mind, to display them season 4 will no doubt expand on that. So there's talking about mental health. There's Adira's mental health of having, which they totally exploited. I mean in a good way, as a dramatic device. Then, the whole thing about being seen, that metaphor, if it wasn't too obvious for you, but it was fine. They're overdue. Trans and bi people or trans and non-gendered are overdue. And then Jared chimed in and said, now imagine if that tech were applied to the Dax symbiont, which it kind of was. Anyway, seeing if it applied to the Dax symbiont, that paves the way for Terry Farrell and Nicole DeBoer to return, and the guy that played Curzon for a minute. Anyway, talking about helpful technology, taking wacky doodle trill or maybe Vulcan or Klingon rituals and finding some way to whatever. But here's Nathaniel asked this twice very politely. Ask again. Mm-hmm. It's going to be for you. What do you make of Chakotay's biorhythmic device, the Akuna? Would that be repurposing mental health tech?
Larry, can you remind me about that episode?
I'm trying to think. The Akuna was the little thing that when he did his spirit quests and he got it out, and he caught me a little off guard there. I was just thinking it was I didn't think about it being technology. I was thinking it was another symbolic doodad in his spirit kit.
I don't know if we want to open up this whole can of worms, but
5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. Medications. I don't know if we think of medications as technology. Technology can sort of refine naturally occurring elements, but
I was gonna say
there's a lot of
those mushrooms are growing out there without aid of.
Well, I actually wanted to talk about mushrooms. There's now that some of the scientific limitations on studying different drug categories are being lifted a little bit. Shrooms, the street name for mushrooms, the drug, they're being used now in studies to treat anxiety and depression, and the way they work is for folks who have really treatment-resistant depression. We're talking everything's been tried, nothing works. Therapy's not working, medications haven't been working. What some of these more psychedelic drugs do is they take the ingrained, heavily used neural pathways, and they just kind of give them a pause, and they kind of open up the possibility for new pathways to be wired. That's why sometimes people who have dropped acid in the 60s report, having new connections being made, new awareness, new ideas that they never thought of before. So these drugs might be a way to get people to see things in a different light, in much the same way that in different cultures have used plants and different naturally occurring substances to aid in vision quests. So I don't know if that answers this question at all.
The Akuna,
yes,
was a tech device that was made to replace psychotropic herbs.
Oh,
take the dangers of them away and just purely get to the tech high of it.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah. Well, there we go, Larry. A nice two-hit combo.
The K3 of the whole problematic, trying to explore Chakotay's native heritage with a fake Native American guy who only brought them trouble, trouble eventually, and they just thought it was all problematic, and they never went back to that again. So we didn't really delve on this much after that, but this was a very 24th century,
Glenda's cracking me up here, Larry. Mushroom therapy is pretty promising. Mycelia could save us. The mycelial network, that might be the way for us, the future here, Larry.
Maybe your celio might, but my celio is not. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Let me guess, you're coming up from the bottom, right?
I'm coming up from the bottom, yeah, in terms of the comments.
Charlotte had a point here at 11:29 I thought of earlier, and I didn't get around to saying it, but yes, you're talking about the synths on Mars, but it was the same. We had the same thing with Measure the Man, about
yes.
androids since then, when they used to be called androids, And then the Model E, the EMH Mach 1s, which I thought was like, oh, they're recycling this story again. But I guess you can never not recycle, civil rights and freedom enough. But yeah, as a functioning thing in Voyager, we're really going to do does it have legal rights or not? But the holograms, and you saw full discarded Mach 1s mining, which,
So Linda mentions block the negativity, and people are talking about ignoring is a great ally on the internet. One thing I want to say about this is, and I think a lot of people, especially a lot of Star Trek Discovery fans, have experienced this. There's a lot of documented research on if you're in a minority group, and also especially if you talk about issues related to minority issues. So if you're a woman on the internet, if you're a person of color, if you're talking about LGBTQ issues, you will have a torrential onslaught of internet trolls sort of coming after you. This often happens. And here's where I think ignoring and reporting and blocking really fails us. Is it kind of gets back to that example I gave about my patient. These 5 kids were bullying him. Well, similarly, if you go on the internet and you talk about, hey, I love Star Trek Discovery, I love the diversity in front and behind the camera, and if you're just hit with 100 negative comments, it's impossible to report all of that. It's impossible to try to have a good experience there. So a lot of the social media platforms have relied on reporting, and where we really need to move towards is them better capturing inhumane, bad behavior before it gets to the user. And it can't be the user's responsibility to report hate on the internet.
It's like, can we cut off the serial killer before they kill people? Like, we got Jeffrey Dahmer with the bodies in the freezer, but could we have done something about him before?
Yeah, and there's ways to kind of regulate this stuff. Blocking newly created accounts from being able to quickly comment is one thing that'll go. Creating trust scores on different users based on how often they're found to be engaging in bad behavior.
Like there's in eBay shopping, eBay store.
Yeah, there's a lot of safety.
Can you trust this seller? Can you trust, applying that?
Yes, safety needs to be built in more. And I think, honestly, the reason why Larry probably has been done less so is it looks better on a social network when they have more users and more quote-unquote engagement. So again, this gets back to regulation and why I'm so big on tech regulation. Yeah.
So thank you, Christoph. The episode on Orville was called Majority Rule, Season 7, Episode 1, or probably Episode 107. And who is this here? Charlotte says Duolingo, which is the language learning, sends you a picture of the owl logo all sad and crying if you haven't logged in for your language lessons in a long time.
And that set off a huge thread making fun of or playing on the hoot and the owls, which I was cracking up inside watching that as it was going by.
It's so great when I always say, anybody who's just watching a Star Trek for the first time now, you say, oh, I'm so envious to have that first experience. That's the way I am with this thread right now, guys. That's just who I am.
Okay. There you go. You are such a hoot, Larry.
Yeah. Don't pollute. Every time, this is the second or third week when you talk about anticipation. Is there anybody in our thread that still immediately thinks of the old Heinz ketchup commercials with the Carole King, the anticipate, to say how slow the ketchup was? Or maybe it was Hunt's. Or anyway, it was Heinz ketchup. It's slow good. Because they would have the ketchup bottle up and they'd have a close-up on the ketchup barely. And the whole time Carole King is singing, anticipation, anticipation, you're making me wait.
I'm not familiar with that one.
YouTube is your friend, I guess. But okay, somebody else. We've got people in the chat. Anyway, every time you say anticipation, I always want to go. I mean, you didn't have to have the commercial to remember the Carole King song anyway, but yeah. It was a top 10 hit. Okay.
Some folks
her
were asking
album,
about...
That was on the album Tapestry, by the way, which was a number one. When I was first aware of music when I was a kid in slow motion days pre-internet, that was the number one album for like years and for months and months and months, number one seller. And then it was
Tapestry. It was called Tapestry? You're kidding me. It was called Tapestry?
Yeah. And then it was replaced by, I want to say it was replaced by Fleetwood Mac and Rumors, the album.
Oh, a beautiful album. Well, I thought we were going to get through a whole episode of Life Support Live without mentioning Tapestry.
You're welcome.
Apparently, here we are at the 11th hour.
Now I only have 2 touchdown passes, and I'll keep that string alive. Oh, wait, that doesn't exist. Okay. So it's talking about streaks. So yeah, we should probably start wrapping up soon, but I'm gonna wing it.
Yeah.
Whole hoot owl thread here.
Linda says Tapestry was my first album, and Karen says I got my water intake for today already. A little reference to our drinking game here on Life Support Live. Larry, this episode was actually inspired by a viewer request. So a lifer in the community here mentioned. Do you remember where that request came from?
Considering that I took it wrong in the beginning, or I had another take on it. Somebody the last week or two, thought we were talking about social media, digital specifically's effect, which we've talked about today.
Yeah.
We were going to save that for its own topic some week, and we still can do that. It's not as if it's not a topic that could stand on its own for an hour or so.
Well, and as Christoph says, the 11th hour was the first episode of the 11th Doctor, just saying if we run out of Trek stuff. Oh my gosh, the large tapestry of storytelling and science fiction. It's all connected. It's all connected.
Mine was I got you with that one. That was better than it.
Yours was more subtle.
It dawned on me. Yeah, I didn't even know that's where we were going. Okay, I'm trying to.
So I mentioned that this episode was a viewer request, folks. We are back in this mode of new topics that are completely big open like this, or they're requests from you, or they might be specific to something else. So let us know. Let us know in the comments what do you want to talk about next. It's Star Trek, it's mental health, it's helping you to boldly go right now in your own life to make sense of this wacky world that we're living in. So we would love to hear what you want us to talk about next week. We love topic requests that come from you. Some of my favorite episodes of Life Support Lives were just viewer recommendations from.
And we got a long stretch here where we go back to our original format idea. And we had part of the original format idea was that we weren't just on a theme, but we actually applied the theme to specific characters, specific episodes. So we can get back to that too. If there's a character or an episode or a moment or a piece of technology or a planet or culture.
Robert is saying pets in space.
Pets in space.
Space. We did talk about tribbles, and most of those pets seem to be. There's a lot of cats in Star Trek, and then there's a dog. Are there many more pets?
No, there's a Targ. More than one dog.
There's more than one dog?
There's number one on Picard. There's Molly.
Right.
Janeway's Molly that's not with her. There's Porthos on Enterprise.
Yeah, that's 3. Okay. Okay.
We're getting there. There's probably there's Dog on Lower Decks now, who went away, but will never be forgotten.
Right.
Yeah. Gosh, guys, we're a little over time, but
Larry, what's coming up for you?
Pixel Paradise says, ask your algorithms to divide by 0 or go to the last digit, compute the last digit of pi.
I love that.
Yeah. And then you kind of
reminds me of
around on all the lights flickering. Yeah.
It reminds me of the original Apple headquarters. The street was named One Infinite Loop, which is a little bit of a joke because if you have an infinite loop in your program, it's going to crash, which is a little funny thing. Larry, as the sad music starts to play, what do you have coming up for us this week? How can people stay in touch this week with you?
I got nothing happening. In fact, I'm taking a hike off the net. I won't be available at all.
Okay. Well, Folks, don't follow Larry's stuff this week because you won't see anything.
I'm going to do an experiment to see how long I can stay. No, guys. I'm not that lucky. Hey, there's some things. There's nothing immediately coming up, but there's some cool things coming down the pike. We've got some news here to announce in another couple of weeks.
We got some fun
We're pretty much sure, but you want to hang on with us toward the latter part of February. We're going to have another special show on two fronts. Got another watch along coming along, but it's hooked into something special. So I don't want to. I want to wait a little closer in before we talk about it, Ollie.
I see what you're doing, Larry, building a little anticipation there.
A little, yes. It's a tapestry of my tools that I get to...
You're pushing it.
I use it like a Carole King. But we're coming back around to cancel convention season again because of the pandemic. And so a lot of conventions have already announced what they're doing, so... We're exploring taking the show to some of those. We'll see what happens.
Taking it on the road, if you will.
Just can't wait to get on the COVID road again.
Oh, gosh.
But otherwise, yeah, it's where you're watching me right now live is my Facebook and or my YouTube channel. Everybody, please go like and subscribe my YouTube channel, which is just Larry Nemecek. And if you have a Twitch account and you haven't gone over already, we have to, like, one of the benchmarks of the Twitch is 50 followers, and I think we're up to 36 or 37. So get you and all your kids and family to keep them Twitch postcards coming and go over and like us on Twitch. Anyway, I've probably taken up the whole sad music by now, but yeah.
Almost.
We'll see.
We're
Join
close
me
to very end.
Tuesdays Pacific for Trekland Tuesdays live, and every Tuesday the Trek Files. We have some awesome Trek Files episodes coming up every Tuesday too.
And
Facebook.
folks, I am at Ollie Mattu on social and the Psych Show on YouTube. We're going to be back in 1 week with another Life Support Live episode. We have no idea what we're talking about.
The Facebook page, go to our Facebook page and get it on the vote for the new theme.
Give us feedback on what you'd like us to talk about next. Thank you all for being here. This was a blast, and we'll see you in a week. Live long and prosper, folks.
Trek well, everybody.